I'm trying to get Liz's attention. We have, as always, Stephen Yates, who is the foreign policy expert, also advisor to former VP Dick Cheney, and with D.C. International Advisory. Stephen, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Dana.
Hey, it's good to speak with you again. We've heard so much fear-mongering from Democrats on the sequester. Yesterday I talked about how the media was trying to make us feel bad by explaining how all the zoo animals are going to die if we don't do something to stop the sequester. Janet Napolitano, when briefing reporters, said that, well, we're not going to be able to maintain the same level of security, and we just don't know if we're going to be able to protect you from terrorists, so we will probably all die. When you hear this sort of fear-mongering from Democrats where it concerns security and the sequester, what is your response to them? Are they in any way accurate?
No, I think it just shows a complete lack of seriousness about really the first purpose of having a federal government. And, for those who can't remember, it's to provide a common defense. And over the last decade, we've spent a lot using our military, while it costs a lot to keep it going, it costs more to make sure that we're planning for future needs that we can't even foresee now. And what they're doing basically is pointing a gun at everybody and threatening the worst, when really, when they talk about compromise, we know what they really mean: agree with us or else. What most common sense people want is real compromise. Defense needs to be a part of the solution, but it need not be the whole back on which it's carried.
And somehow, I know that you don't agree with this either. I mean, no one is saying that that defense spending, that it's a sacred cow. I mean, we all agree that there's some things that, can be addressed in some ways, just like with any other department. But for them to for Janet Napolitano and other members of the administration to try to use these scare tactics and invoke 9/11 and do, well, we're just not going to be able to keep you as safe. That's what these cuts mean. That seems to me absolutely reprehensible. It's fear-mongering at its finest. And it seems, because that's not going to happen. We were just talking about spending, what, $15 billion less this year than we did last year?
No, we're going to still spend more than we spent last year. We're going to spend $15 billion less than the increase would have been. Right. Yeah, so we're still spending, a couple trillion. That's our overall, but we're still spending a ton of money. This isn't going to have that. We hear about the furloughs and the 800, all of the folks that are going to be laid off and not going to have work at the Pentagon, and it just, Washington D.C. is going to go unprotected. No one's going to be able to screen flights. It's, Jesus is going to appear in the sky, Stephen, and we're all going to go blind. The only analogy I can come to that maybe brings it home to everyone is if you had to take a household cut of 10% of your overall revenue, and your solution was, we're going to remove the garage door and the front door and the back door to your house because that is 10%. And therefore you're going to have the winds blow in and burglars are going to come in, what have you. But you made that choice. And I think Republicans have basically failed to give the president and the executive branch whatever flexibility they need to implement these cuts so that they own the choices they make about where they're trying to inflict pain for their political purposes.
And that's the thing. You heard the audio of Senator Claire McCaskill saying that, well, Republicans need to get something on the floor. But, they have. There are two different pieces of legislation that they've pushed through. Harry Reid hasn't done anything about it in the Senate. So it kind of, poses the question, well, who is it that really doesn't care about if it's such a national security issue? Why did the president only pick up the phone last Thursday? Why did the president refuse to encourage Democrats to consider the legislation that came from the House? And why did he waffle on it? I mean, he was going to veto any reduction in these cuts back in 2011. What made him change his mind, do you think?
I think it's all politics, really, because he thought that if he could blackmail Republicans with what he thought was their sacred cow, they surely would have to relent and give in on more spending in the areas that he wanted. The problem is the defense of the United States is not one party or one ideology's sacred cow. It's in the national interest. And no responsible leader should be trying to leverage a political point on the backs of the men and women who risk their lives and the needs of our country.
Right.
But he sees a political advantage in trying to brand Republicans as being irresponsible. But you made exactly the correct point. There's only one body in the entire government right now that is entirely absent without leave, and it's the United States Senate. And it's controlled by what party since 2006? It's the president's party. And really, that is where the focus ought to be. That's where the compromise needs to be. And the compromise needs to be the Democrats relenting and allowing something to get done, which happens to be their job.
Right, exactly. I wanted to get your opinion as well. John Kerry has now been released onto the world. God help us all, Stephen. First off, he made up the country, which was, awful cute. Made up a country. Then he... what his remark, and I've been interested in watching the British press deal with him over that Falklands remark that he made. He's giving a press conference. They ask him a softball question about essentially relationship between Argentina and Great Britain, and he basically, it seems to me like he sort of slammed our ally Britain and almost suggested that it kind of seemed to me that they have no basis to, I'm not going to get involved in this, and this country, I know people are claiming sovereignty. Remember when Romney was over in London, touring with the mayor over in London, and he just accurately recalled something that was reported in their own papers, and our media stalked him for several days afterwards, screaming, "What about your gaffes?" We haven't heard that with John Kerry. These were gaffes. These were just how much of an effect, or how embarrassing is this?
Well, I think it's very embarrassing, but at the same time, this is John Kerry, and everyone in Washington and much of the world has known what they can expect from him, which is essentially, I think, part-time work and not really careful attention to things. But what he said on the Falkland Islands has been Obama administration policy. It's basically the State Department bureaucrat policy, where we have these things called allies, and then there are these territorial disputes, but we're somehow neutral in a dispute that involves an ally. Mm-hmm. I think common sense people would see that doesn't add up. And so really the Obama administration, even in the first term, was pushing back on the British on the Falklands, and really no good purpose. But Kerry, inartfully, is expressing a policy that doesn't make sense. So there you have it.
And it seems to me, is it just because even though on its face this administration behaves as though Britain's an ally, but really Argentina's government is more in line with our administration? Could it be something? Is that the attraction?
Except the Argentinian government is not in line with our government.
Well, yeah, they're way more left.
Yeah, but it may be in line with the ideology of some in our government. Yeah. But I can find no real benefit to this, other than some wild notion that we would somehow be involved. But that's never been the case. It would seem to be easy to support the British. I just think some in the administration and some of its supporters have something against Great Britain and the idea of an empire of the past.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Well, I can't wait. Oh, really quickly, I'll ask you as well about Chuck Hagel. It looks as though he's cleared the last hurdle and he's on his way to confirmation.
He will. I think we saw this coming down the pike. I am pleased that Senator Cruz and a number of stalwarts raised a few speed bumps. But this is going to be the weakest Secretary of Defense in American history.
Oh, boy.
We can only hope no major crisis unfolds.
We can only hope. Well, a lot can happen in 4 years. That's the scary thing. Oh, goodness. Stephen Yates with the D.C. International Advisory, DCIadvisory.org. Stephen, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
All right, take care.